there's no guarantee of a sale price, right? And especially if your property is more unique or needs like a special buyer, it's really nerve-wracking to have it not sell or have it like worry about selling.
Agreed.
Welcome to Real Stories in Real Estate with your host, Denise Laframboise. Real people sharing real stories about their adventures in real estate.
So welcome to the Real Stories in Real Estate podcast. And today I have my favorite guest, my husband, Gabe.
Hello.
And today what I want to chat about is the house we sold when we moved to where we are now, which I would say was our decided forever home, right? So house 3 for us was the one we actually thought we were going to live in. And we were going to sell house 2 and buy house 3. And at the time, neither of us, remember we lived, like I was about half an hour of a drive from work and you were how far from work?
I was about an hour.
And we had 2 little kids. I was on mat leave with the second. And we were like, this is not sustainable because neither of us can get to the daycare in time. Like, this was not going to be a great move. So we decided to move closer to your work.
Yes.
Right? Because you were the one that could leave work and go check on the kids if they fell at daycare or something. Whereas I didn't have the same flexibility to be able to just leave. Right.
Correct.
So we decided we were going to move to Whitby.
That's right.
I had been there once to go to the passport office.
Yeah.
You went there every day, but I actually didn't even really understand where it was.
Well,
407 didn't go here at the time.
No, there was no 407.
Yeah.
I had worked here for a few years. We had decided to move here. And then you had said, where should we move? And I said, I think Brooklyn is nice. It was in the right spot. It was because you were still working in Richmond Hill and it was on Highway 7. So you had easy access to the highway. And you said,
I want to look at a bunch of places because I didn't know, right? Like I need to research everything. So I remember I made you go look at Whitby Shores and Pickering and like
Ajax,
in Markham. Markham. Like we looked at all different places. Ultimately, you were right.
Yeah.
It's on record. You were right that this was definitely where we should have been. We looked at Uxbridge too.
Did we look at Uxbridge?
Yeah. And then
we looked at Stouffville as well.
And then we realized that the school the kids would go to is in Whitby, and that it was going to be a long commute for them. Like we were going to put a 4-year-old on a bus for 45 minutes.
Yes.
Ridiculous. Yeah. So we ended up deciding we were going to live here. Remember, we were like, at the time, it was a really hot market for buying and selling.
Yeah.
So do you remember like we would go to an open house or we'd have like an appointment to go see something and we'd be driving the 45 minutes to get here and it would be sold.
Yeah.
Or we'd see it and it was sold
before we could get an offer in, it would be sold. Like we would talk about it and then we would get our offer in and there would have already been gone.
Or multiple offers or it was really an environment where it was really hard to buy something. And this was actually the first time we were ever going to be selling something and buying something.
Yes.
And I don't think at the time we really understood the numbers.
No.
I know what I know now, and I know how well I prepare my clients for what is our worst case scenario we're going to sell at. But at the time, because it was such a hot seller's market, I think it was like, okay, there's no world where you're going to get less than $650 for your house. We're going to, at the time they said, okay, we were going to list it at like $659 and it was going to sell for over $700 because that's what was happening in our neighborhood. It was a very desirable neighborhood to live in.
Everything was new.
And we had a 2-bedroom basement apartment. So a lot of people in that area were desiring, in-law suites or income properties. So that it was going to be a big add-on. So we didn't feel the stress of needing to sell first. We weren't worried about selling. We were worried about where we're moving to, right? We wanted the right forever home.
Correct.
And remember we tried to offer on the one on Berwick. And we had to like drive there, remember? And like everything was done in paper at this time. Like it's not that long ago, but we had to go like sit in our car
outside the house,
outside the house,
printer and sign the paper. Yeah.
and then all the realtors would go back in, and then they'd all come out, and then they'd all go back in, and they all like that was a whole thing, right? In-person offer night. And then we put another offer in the one Darius Harns.
On Darius Harns,
right?
yes.
And we really wanted that house, didn't get that one either.
What I remember the most is even back then, if you had the financing condition was a big thing, remember? People wouldn't put in finance conditions in there either.
Yeah, but I mean that's still true today. Like
Yes.
anywhere in the GTA, it's still really difficult to have any conditions.
But I think at the time, I think my dad thought we'd be nuts to not have a financing condition.
Well, okay, so your dad was a real estate agent in a much smaller market, and he believed that all offers should have a condition of the sale of our house.
Yes.
Which nobody in the GTA had ever seen.
No.
Right? I mean, it's starting to become a little more common now, in a slower market, but as things pick up again, we'll never see those again. No. Like it's not normal to expect that your house will not sell in the GTA. It's just what price will it sell for?
Yes.
How low are you going to have to drop your price
for it to move?
Right? Because our house was in Newmarket, it was a very desirable area. There was no world where we couldn't drop our price low enough that someone will buy it.
Correct.
Right. But at the time we didn't realize how low we were going to have to go.
No.
And so we did not really play this best case, worst case scenario and have all of the numbers correct from who we were working with at the time, long before I did this for a living.
Yeah.
And so we ended up, remember, we found the right house. Remember we came here, I think we came here to see another house and it was sold on the way here.
Yeah. And we were driving around the neighborhood.
Yeah, we found that open house.
Found an open house. Went and looked at this beautiful house. It looked like something out of a magazine.
I'm pretty sure it was featured in Home and Garden magazine.
Yeah, probably. It looked like it would have been. Like
beautiful wainscoting everywhere, staged to the nines.
Yeah.
What we found really attractive about it was that we always have basement apartments in properties.
Yes.
But this one in particular had a side entrance, so you could put a basement apartment in it. But this model had a loft.
Third floor loft that you could
use as a rec room, right? Like it would be similar to having your whole house, but then you had this income ability in the basement as well.
Correct. Yeah.
And we loved that house, and it was super expensive, way
out of our budget. And then, so we went and looked at that one and sort of drove around the neighborhood and saw another coming soon. Was it coming soon sign or a for sale? Coming soon sign. It was the same model house, but a little bit more lived in.
It was quite a bit rougher. Like their dogs had like chewed the baseboard, and the colors that it was painted were not, it was not a Home and Garden type magazine home. Yeah, but and it didn't have hardwood everywhere. It had more carpet. Yes. It had some other kind of cheaper finishes. Yeah. But overall, it was the same house, yes, but kind of in our price point.
Yes.
And we were really excited about that. And so we ended up buying that one.
Yeah.
And we kind of got a deal on it because the people had already bought their dream home.
Yes.
And they needed to sell, and they needed a certain date. So we were like, okay, we know our house is going to sell. It's in a desirable neighborhood. Everything that goes up sells right away. So we know ours is going to sell. We were not worried at all.
No.
And so we bought that house firm with no conditions. And
their preferred closing date.
Yeah, we let them pick the date, and that was awesome. And I think we got that house for about $200,000 less than the fancy one that we saw, knowing that we could then renovate this one to be the way we wanted it to be.
And I think we weren't the only offer, and I think we were still less money, but that we had met the conditions is what sort of sold.
Yeah, we had no conditions, and we had the correct closing date.
Yeah.
And the other people had some conditions about they wanted to see that remember that it was this weird above ground pool, and they wanted some conditions around that.
Oh,
we'll fix it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
because remember it was full of algae. Like it just looked like it didn't work. It was great. And so then we bought that house and we're super excited. We got a huge discount on it. We made our money buying that house. And then we finished staging our house and we listed it. And the plan was list it for $659 and it's going to sell for over $700.
Yeah.
And remember, it went up on the Friday.
Yeah.
And we had no showings.
No showings. And then all of a sudden, all these other houses started coming up in the neighborhood on the market, and
like same models, but $10,000 or $20,000 cheaper.
Yeah, and they're selling.
Yes, or listed with realtors who had a huge following in the neighborhood, so they were like, getting their own buyers through.
Yeah.
And we kept seeing all these houses go up and be sold, go up and be sold, and our house was sitting there. Nothing
happened.
So then they dropped the price, and then it still sat there.
Dropped it again.
And they dropped the price again, and it still sat there.
Yeah.
And our closing date is now coming up on our house. And in order to be able to close and bridge finance, we had to have a firm closed offer or a firm like condition-free offer on ours to be able to bridge finance.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, what are we going to do? Like, and in true, like in my fashion, I'm like, well, okay, maybe we keep this house and we sell the other rental instead, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, if we have 3 houses and we have to sell one of them, if this one's not selling, that one will. But it was quite a stressful time because you can't control what the market does. And we happened to just like miss that, the
sweet spot.
Just missed it.
Yeah.
And who could have known, right? And so, I mean, we really need to know that you need to plan for the worst case scenario because
always
it was super stressful.
It was very stressful, and especially at the time, like you've got this big financial thing happening, and we had 2 young kids, right?
And even just like the getting out for showings, like I'm swiffering the floor that had dark hardwood, so it had the kids' footprints everywhere, and I'm trying to like.
It was very stressful. Chloe was 1. Fiona was 6 months old, so it was like.
It was the worst.
It was nuts.
So we did eventually end up selling that house for about $100,000 less than we had originally been told we thought we would sell it for. And $100,000 was overkill. We didn't need that much money to close. Like we barely squeaked by. Like we borrowed money from our parents to pay the movers. Do you remember that? And I think even for some closing costs, like we did not have enough because the market had turned and we had bought higher than what we could afford. Which, I mean, if you think in today's prices, like we bought that house for $540. And that was well over our price range. Like, I mean, we had another house that was eating up some of our income as well. But like, we're not talking $2 million homes here.
No.
Right. No. And we just thought, well, we're selling in this bigger market and we're buying in a smaller market. We're going to sell higher and we're going to buy lower. But we didn't realize, like, I don't think we really sat down and did the numbers the way that I make people do them now.
No, which is good. People should learn from our mistakes,
right?
Well, so that their lives are less stressful.
Well, I just think like there's no guarantee of a sale price, right? And especially if your property is more unique or needs like a special buyer, it's really nerve-wracking to have it not sell or have it like worry about selling.
Agreed. It's brutal.
I would also say, like, just on a topic of kind of picking the right realtor, like, I remember that was the first time we'd ever sold a property. And we interviewed a few different realtors. And sometimes the person who tells you what you want to hear may not be the best person to sell with.
No.
Right? Like overall, I think you need to ask yourself or ask them, like what kind of network are you marketing to? What type of marketing plan? What type of staging do you expect to do? What things would be necessary to do in the home to get top dollar for it? There's a lot of great realtors out there, and some of them are going to answer those questions differently than others. And I think that's important. I also think managing dropping a price is hard, right? Like when your property has been listed higher and then it doesn't sell and you have to drop the price, it is really hard because a lot of buyers will be like, there's a reason we didn't look at that house before, and they won't come, right? Like how you market that price drop is huge.
Yeah, because a lot of people will ask like, hey, why are they dropping the price? What's wrong with that house?
Or they think like, I mean, even when
I just think that.
well, even when people have an offer that falls through, people like instinctively think, what's wrong with that house? And the reality is a lot of the times it's a buyer that's not pre-approved, or it's something wrong with the buyer, right?
Yes.
But they, you just automatically assume it's something wrong with the property.
Yeah.
So overall, terrible experience. We live to go through it. I hope nobody else repeats that. I will say that if you're ever buying first before you're selling, you really need to be playing with worst case scenario numbers, and you need to have a plan. And that you need to realize you need a firm sold on both properties to be able to bridge finance, which is huge. But overall, it was still the right decision. It just sucked at the time.
Stressful at the time.
But so that's selling our house and buying, I guess, our forever home, right? And so thanks for sharing that.
Oh, anytime.
This is the Real Story, the Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Denise Gabriel, and you can consume this wherever you watch your podcasts or listen to your podcasts, like iHeartRadio, Amazon, and Spotify. Thanks so much.